Welcome to Season 7 of The Common Bridge, hosted by Richard Helppie, a leading analyst, philanthropist, and entrepreneur. Now expanded with healthcare, education, finance, science, and world affairs bridges, the podcast, now in its 7th season, with an audience of over 7 million worldwide, explores issues in a fiercely nonpartisan way. Find us at The Common Bridge at substack.com, YouTube, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Hello, welcome to The Common Bridge. I'm your host, Rich Helppie. On The Common Bridge, we've covered the topic about mental health and the enormous need that we have in the country. We've had guests like Kevin Fisher on, guests like Dr. Hong on from the University of Michigan, and of course, Judge Milton Mack, a returning guest who's been heavily involved with changes that we can make to our mental health care system. Also joining us today is a mother, a concerned citizen who's been profoundly affected. We have Beverly, Gille, who is joining us in studio today to talk about her personal experience with some of the mental health policies. So welcome, Judge Mack, and welcome, Beverly, to The Common Bridge. And Judge Mack, our audience is familiar with you, but if you don't mind, just a little bit on your experience as a judge over the last many decades.
Well, I served as a Wayne County probate judge for 25 years. And then I became state court administrator. And I've been serving as a retired judge since then, visiting in various courts across the state. I've been very active on the mental health side. I was on the Mental Health Commission in 2004. As state court administrator, I was a member of the Conference of State Court Administrators, and I wrote the policy paper that year on how to improve the mental health system. And that led to the creation of a national task force, which has led to the creation of recommendations for states across the country to improve the mental health system. And we've seen a number of those recommendations take place. The key thing is we're changing the system from an inpatient model to an outpatient model. We're changing the system from something which is not family friendly to something that is family friendly, so people can get help early on in the course of their illness.
And not a moment too soon, and I know that we'll be talking today about some of the legislation that's in process here in Michigan. Beverly, thank you so much for making the journey down from up north. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and your sons, and perhaps a little bit about what's brought you here today.
Struggles through the mental health issue in my family, and our family hasn't had an easy route throughout the whole circus of this, and dealing with the community mental health and finding out for Brad like who could be his payee, and and his future, and worrying about his future alone was very stressful on all of our family.
Now, Brad is the youngest of your three sons.
The youngest one right now.
And how old is Brad?
He's 42.
42. And I understand when he was a teenager, and an event occurred.
That's correct.
What happened?
On my end of it, I was at the computer and Brad came into the home and he said, Mom, somebody gave me bad pot. And he says, I'm freaking out. I'm like, I stopped what I was doing. I was like, what are you doing at 14 smoking marijuana? And and that was aside from the issue. Now I'm dealing with something. He's saying he's got bad pot. So Dad and I sat there with him and we said, okay, we can't really take him right now we've got to see him come down from this. So we coddled him, and we thought, well, we'll just let him come down, then we'll take him into emergency room. But it got worse. He got more in the fetal position, and we waited, and my husband and I were taking shifts sleeping because it was now we're into the wee hours of the morning. And then finally I woke my husband up. I said, I can't do this anymore. To see him just slowly deteriorate. Exceedingly fast deteriorate. And so we wrapped him up in the blanket and we took him in the ER. Dr. Lowe, he was my family doctor. And he came in and examined Brad, and he did the blood work, and it came back that there was no drugs in his system. And the whole idea of smoking marijuana at the age of 14 is not good for the brain, number one. And a lot of the children in the history that I've learned, that's a crucial time that children will get paranoid schizophrenia.
So he has and so I know, so this 28-year journey that you've been on since he did have the event, and culminating in a very tragic event up in Traverse City, Walmart. And I can't even imagine as a parent what you were experiencing, that multiple people stabbed and your child was the perpetrator.
I don't even think that I've digested that quite yet. I think that whole thing, that's my son, and that's somebody that I cherish and I love. To see him have to struggle his life with demons and just these thoughts in his head that, it's pathetic to see him go through that.
So you and your husband, a intact, concerned family, a child with an issue, you began to seek help. What did you experience after this interaction with your primary care doctor?
Dr. Lowe came back to me and said that Brad had clean blood on him. The results, there was no drugs. And he told me at that point that he was diagnosed as severe depression. And then once we got into the, we took him down to the, I can't remember, the Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids. And that's when it determined that he was paranoid schizophrenic. So it all happened so fast. I don't even believe Brad really had a childhood. At 10 to 14, they asked me before, what was his childhood like? There was no time to really tell. It was like everything before that was just gone. It was like, now we're dealing with such a traumatic illness that that was our life now.
And so we want to understand the course of treatment. So right around 1997, here you are introduced to the mental health system, mental health services here in the state of Michigan. Judge Mack, I don't know if you have a total recall about what the policies were like back in 97, and maybe what changed after that point. Were there significant events?
We've had some significant legislative changes since then. Previously, you had to be a danger to self or others in order to get involuntary treatment, and the only thing a court could order was hospitalization. So this had all changed in 1963 with the Community Mental Health Act. The idea was we're going to reduce the number of hospital beds and treat people on an outpatient basis. The federal government would agree to pay for this. Unfortunately, the federal government succeeded in reducing the number of hospital beds, but didn't put the outpatient system in place.
So we had a system where there would be inpatient facilities, and then the Community Mental Health Act came in what year?
1963.
63. So it's been around for a while, and yet And the only thing a judge could order in a situation like the Gille family experience was, well, we can put him in the hospital. That couldn't have been a permanent solution.
No, it's not, because we cut the number of hospital beds in this country from 559,000 in 1960 to about 35,000 today.
And with the expansion in population,
Right.
So
the system had to be changed. If to rely on a short-term hospital stay to be effective was just ridiculous. I mean, you take a look at Wayne County. The CMH serves about 38,000 people. And over a 5-year period, we had 15,000 petitions from 9,000 people. 600 of those 9,000 people accounted for 36% of all petitions filed.
Oh my!
They're just cycling through the system over and over again. So we looked at the people who had at least 10 petitions, and there were 79 of them. In the one fiscal year, we spent $3.3 million on hospitalization and $1.6 million on incarceration. Nearly $5 million. And for that, we got nothing.
And I'm recalling an earlier time you were on the Common Bridge, and you talked about the jail system and the bail system and said it's about mental health, and even gave anecdotes about some people wanted to go back into jail because they could get their medication. So, Bev, when Brad when you took him down to Grand Rapids, did they give him an admission and give him a hospital stay?
Oh yeah. And then my son and I went down. We took Brad down there, and we ended up we dropped him off at the doors and kind of assigned him in. And my son and I, my oldest son and I, we slept in the car that night and waited. And then we found out that they opened up the Ronald McDonald home for us, and so we were there for, I believe, like a good week. Got Brad more stable, and then we brought him home. And then he had his community mental health and his doctor there. And you know what was really great about that? He was under my husband, our care. He was still a minor. And so I would take him to his doctor. And one thing that I learned is that Brad will always, it'll be like treating sugar diabetes. He has to have his medication for the rest of his life. And so,
when you brought him home, was he given medication or counseling or any other treatment?
Yes, and we made sure as his parents, that we were taking him to his doctor's appointments and all his counseling and everything that he needed.
And how did things go during that period then when you got home?
Because we made sure he was getting his treatment. I was able to communicate with his doctor at the time. And so it was flowing. Everything was flowing. Dad, we took care of him. Brad did quite well at that time, as long as he had his medication.
And was the medication covered by insurance or through a state program? Or?
It was a state program that covered him.
And Judge Mack, when you think about that period, now we're looking at, the late 90s into the 2000s, a young man's had a crisis. Great family came in to support him. Things are going better. When you think about that from a policy standpoint, what was going on at that point that seemingly addressed what was going on with young Brad?
Well, the point is, it was young Brad. What happened when he became an adult?
Oh.
Were you able to communicate with the people?
He got a lawyer, and we asked, we want to be guardians over him, knowing that the future is not going to get any better for him, that he's going to need supervision, talking to his doctors, being able to have that open communication, and finding out that we want to just have some kind of not control of him, but knowledge of him as he progresses as an adult. And we were told that, do you want to take away his freedom from him?
Judge, and you two are free to just, if you want to go back and forth on this is great. Look, this is such an important story that we have broad acknowledgement and acceptance that mental health is an issue in the country. It not only affects those that have the diagnosis, it affects their loved ones, it affects their community. And if they, their behavior can threaten other people. And I think what I heard from Judge Mack early on, there had to be a finding in a court, a danger to yourself, danger to others, and the only tool in the toolkit was a hospital stay, but it wouldn't be permanent. And now here you are with a young adult becoming of legal age. And go ahead, Judge Mack, what do you think she experienced?
By the time when he became an adult, her ability to be informed about her son's condition evaporated.
100%.
Right. And her ability to take steps to make something happen, extraordinarily limited. Like, she couldn't go to court and say, I want him hospitalized. She can get a pickup order from the court, and they take him to the hospital, and you got to have 2 doctors certify that the person requires hospitalization before the hearing would even happen. And then the hospital, well, frequently we were seeing as many as 60% of the cases where the petition is actually filed, where the petition doesn't even get to the courthouse because of a variety of reasons. So the system was not designed to help families. It was not designed to really give treatment to people who didn't want it. It's a very good job at that. So the change we finally got in place was in 2016. And in 2016, we changed the standard. So we're not looking to see whether you had an immediate threat of harm to self or others. We're looking to whether you have a lack of understanding of your illness, which could lead to harm to you or others in the near future.
When you say we changed the system, was this legislation, policy? So 2016, now that's a long time. So your son would have come of age around 2001, right? He would have been 18 or right around 2001. So now you've got 15 years of loving your son, doing all the right things, and not having any ability to affect that until.
But she still could not file a petition on her own. She could still not make this.
And what's a definition of it? What's a petition for people that aren't familiar with the term?
It's a piece of paper that says, my son is ill. It's published by the State Court Administrative Office, PCM 201 for the detail, and it outlines what the claim is, and then that is brought to a court, and it's like a civil complaint, sort of similar thing. But the petition cannot be scheduled for hearing until you get these 2 doctors to do the certification. So we had additional legislation in 2018, which really made the system start to work. And so it is working. But in the course of doing that, we discovered other significant flaws in the system. And one that may apply to her case is you can enter an order for treatment today, which would include hospitalization and outpatient treatment for up to 180 days. And then at the end of the 180 days, you can file for a second order. But there's a catch. And that's the problem of mental health code. So the catch is this. The person's in the community. You can file a petition to extend, but you can't file it less than 7 days before or more than 14 days before it expires. So you've got a window of 7 days you can file this petition, number one. Number two, you have to have a certificate from a doctor in order to file the petition. And what happens is people who are on these long-term orders, they know this, and those disappear for a couple of months. And now we can't get the cert, so we can't file the petition. So you have to start all over again from the beginning.
So this is it's terrible. So here's your family doing the right thing. Brad becomes of age. And what was your experience then as it had to be terrifying that you kind of like, I just get this vision that he's cast out into the wilderness and he needs help and you can't legally do it for him. What happened with you and your husband?
Got him on the Section 8 housing, and I got him into an apartment which had the elderlies as well as the young ones. And Brad's sociopathic friends took advantage of him. So I've got this nice apartment. We go shopping for little pieces of furniture at secondhand stores. And I thought there was a good future for him. But these friends would come in and they would just smoke pot in the house. Brad would be sound asleep and I'd go to see him and check on him. And he'd be sound asleep because of the medication, and they'd be in there eating all his food and tearing up the apartment and messing it, and the neighbors would complain. Well, then he got on the ACT team, which is active treatment, and they really didn't do their job.
What is the ACT team?
ACT is a form of intensive supervision for a person receiving psychiatric care. And it's usually very effective. So, the key changes we're going to see with new legislation, assuming it passes, is be much more family friendly.
And I want to get to that legislation, because I think that's an important policy response. And I want to make sure that we have, for our listeners, our readers, and our viewers, an understanding of this very compelling case here. And maybe we want to rewind and say, all right, if this law was in place, back in 1997. So now you've got, his life is kind of being taken apart by his sociopathic acquaintances. They're not friends. They're doing that. No. And you don't have any resource, but he is taking his medication. Did he have interactions with law enforcement or any antisocial behavior that you're aware of?
Yeah, because of those friends that were intruding on him. And he wanted friends. He wanted those, what he thought were his friends. And I had, living up in the Petoskey area, I had Judge May was just an amazing man to kind of guide me through, like, Bev, you can't be his payee and be a mom too. Because these friends would tell Brad, your mom just wants your money. She just wants to take your money. Go get your money, Brad. Well, then there would be a confrontation with Brad with me. And so, and Brad's a big guy, he's like 6 foot, and so then with this, Ed Madsen was Judge May's right-hand man. I would tell him that community mental health just seems like they shun me. They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to give me information because Brad's an adult now, and we can't talk to you. So Ed May went in and sat on a few meetings with community mental health and myself, and he walked out saying, "Man, Bev, they've treated you very rudely in there. They didn't want me to be a part of my own son's life."
And you couldn't file for guardianship involuntarily?
No, I was told that you're going to take his freedom away. Well, look at him now.
What's happened? Maybe we should just jump to that. What's going on with him today? Where is he? And
he's in Saline, the forensic center. And I know he's safe. I know he's being fed, and I know he's got his needs. He's getting his medication.
What, to the extent that you can talk about this, what led to him being eligible and routed to this center in Saline?
He was there before. He was there in that year when it was 2016. My husband and I were living in Arizona, our retirement home. We just got this home, and I came home from work, and I said, we got to go back to Michigan, honey. And he said, I feel it too. It was a parental instinct. We needed to get back home. We sold our home, came back to Michigan, had to settle into the home we bought in Houghton Lake, and find out that, community mental health, we talked to them, and we said we want to meet up with Brad, and we're back, and they were happy that we were back. But we went and met Brad, and I knew he was sick. My husband, I knew he's not well. We went and told them, Brad's not doing good. And they said, oh, he's fine. We see him all the time. It's like, no, he wasn't.
So let me ask you.
Yeah, please.
Let me ask you, the 2016 Forensic Center admission, why was he there?
He thought his dad... This is why we came back. We felt something was very wrong or going wrong. he saw a funeral procession, and he thought his dad was in that hearse, and he thought his dad was dead. And so he followed. Apparently he saw it happen, the burial and everything, and so he went, and I guess he stole a shovel from Home Depot. From what
He was arrested?
No, that's not why he was arrested. He went and tried to dig up this grave, and tore some headstones apart. This is so hard for me to even comprehend, that he would do that. But he thought his dad was buried alive, and he wanted to get his dad out of that grave. And his belief is that in Israel, that they bury their tombs on top of the ground. And he believes that people shouldn't be buried below the ground, that it's wrong. And that's one of his beliefs. And he's very strong on that to this day. But, so anyway, we talked to, my husband talked to Brad on the phone. So, now he's in jail in Petoskey.
This is back then?
Yep.
16.
And 16.
So
he was picked up because I think he went and told him what he did. I'm not exactly.
That detail's not that important. But you know which court he was in?
He was in the district court with Judge Mack.
So the district court sent him to the forensic center to determine competency?
Yes.
Was he determined competent or not?
NGRI.
Right, so he was determined competent or not competent to stand trial, was found to be not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yes.
And the charges were dismissed.
So just terminology, forensic center and NGRI.
NGRI, that's the not guilty by reason of insanity.
Correct.
So when a person is charged with a crime, they can claim that they were unable to comprehend what they were doing. And then the first thing they do is send you to the forensic center to determine are you competent or not.
Is the forensic center an inpatient center?
Yes.
All right, so it's inpatient evaluation and inpatient center, like what we used to call a mental hospital.
Right. And so now the standard for competency to stand trial is very low. If you can understand that the lawyer next to you is defending you, and this lawyer on the other side is trying to put you in jail, and the person with the black robe is hearing a case, it's very low. So to be found to be not competent to stand trial, you've got to be in some serious problem. And then the next step is they try to restore competency at the forensic center. If they do, you go to trial, and then at trial, the jury can find that it's not guilty for reason of insanity, or they can just find you guilty but mentally ill, or they can find you guilty. So I don't know what happened in his case, but since he was found not guilty for reason of insanity, then that would have pushed it into the civil side. In other words, he would have been presumably petitioned for, in the probate code by a probate judge, a petition for hospitalization. As in 2016, we still didn't have assisted outpatient treatment up and running.
So here's this family.
Yeah.
And now he's done something, and they said couldn't even meet this threshold definition of competency. He goes in, and I'm almost afraid to ask this, but they had him in the forensic center, and then they released him back to continue his life at some point.
Well, they gave him a 5-year probation, and that's when he would go into the AFC homes.
What's AFC?
Adult foster care.
Okay, adult foster care. I see. So
your family bounced from teenage crisis, forensic center, community mental health, criminal charges, probation, now into adult foster care, and yet you weren't empowered to actually intervene. And is he taking his medications and going to counseling and becoming a compliant patient at that time?
When he's in the AFC home, and because he's under the jurisdiction of the court, he had to get his medication. and he had to adhere to everything that he was, given. Otherwise, the threat to Brad was that if he breaks any of those rules, he goes back to square one, back to Celine.
Like what happened at the time, they had these 5-year contracts. That's been changed. But on the 5-year contract, the probate court was required to issue an order that you're a person requiring treatment for another year. And year after year, they just keep renewing it. Is that what happened with him?
He got a renewal after the 5-year. He got another year renewal.
Right. And so I'm really curious about what happened at the end of the last renewal. Did it just drop?
Yeah.
Because
They closed the book on my son.
Yeah.
They closed the book.
And see, she's not,
Sheboygan.
right. And so she's not in a position to do anything about that.
And about how old was he at this time?
What part?
Well, when they closed the book on him, how old?
It was in 24.
24 years old. So he has had.
No, 2024, wasn't it?
2024.
Right.
They
Oh, okay.
closed the book on him in October of 24.
So a year before.
And
So
he was in the AFC home that whole time since the forensic center. And he moved to the first AFC home, and then he got transferred to a second one. And the second one, I knew it was in Afton, but I didn't know where. And so,
Yeah, so her problem was at the end of as you're getting towards the end of the last extension, there's no limit to how many extensions you can have. The problem is she can't ask for one. Only the medical professional can file a petition to extend.
But he's not under care. I mean, the court ordered the adult foster care.
Well, the court
They got it renewed, and then they said, and then how was a decision made to give him not adult foster care at that time?
Brad called me and said, Mom, if I can come live with you, they said that if I had a family member, and I could come live with you, I can get out early of my probation. And I was told, I had a phone call, back around 2016 from one of the community mental health workers. Her name was Carol. But she called me, she retired, she called me from her home and she said, Dove, you have to promise me something. And I'm like, what's that, Carol? She said, you got to promise me. And I'm like, okay, I don't usually do backwards promises, but what is that? And she said, you got to promise me you never let Brad live with you. Now right there, it told me Brad's dangerous and she knows he's dangerous. And if he gets off his medication and he's going to hurt somebody. So when Brad asked me, I told him, Brad, because you and your brothers have all been in the court system, the court asked me never to let you live with me. My husband passed away in 21, and now I'm alone, and I can't chance my safety knowing that Brad could be dangerous if he doesn't take his medication, if he isn't ordered to take it.
And ultimately, in a tragic event in Traverse City, he did show he was very dangerous. And
Yeah.
what are you comfortable telling the audience about that day?
Well, Brad loved marijuana. And so now he's out on the streets, and I kept in touch with him the best I could. I have another issue with another son that I'm also dealing with, but legal dispensaries. Brad could go in now, and he's got his Social Security. He can go buy pot. He can make himself sick twice as fast because he cannot have alcohol or marijuana or any kind of drugs. It just deteriorates him so much faster.
Bev, in our conversation at the break, you said you haven't digested everything, but there was a well-publicized case in Traverse City, Michigan, where a man stabbed many people in a Walmart, and that was your son, Brad, and thank God that the people that intervened just apprehended him. What happened after that? Was he arrested, or what occurred after that?
He was arrested. I'm not one to sit in front of a TV and watch the news anymore. It's just, I just don't do it for my reasons. But I was in bed that morning and I had my phone, like we do a lot, and it came up on the screen. It's almost like somebody put it right there before my eyes, and I saw that. And people, Traverse City. And then I see this guy's face, and it was a circle around his face. I'm like, is that Brad? You know, he had lost so much weight. So I hadn't seen him. And now he was on the streets after he was released like 9 months. And then I look and I see now he's, people shoving carts at this person. I'm like, oh my God. And then I see him up against the police car in cuffs. And I notice his clothing. Brad always wears the cargo pants and then like the army colored clothes. And I'm like, that's Brad. And then when they said 42-year-old, he didn't give his name yet, but that was my son. So I called Traverse City jail, and I said, this is Beverly Gille. Do you have my son with you? And they said, yes, hold on. And they got the sergeant on the phone for me. But what I don't understand, honestly, is when he was in Petoskey and those officers told him, you have to move, Brad, you have to get out of here. He was sleeping on the streets of Petoskey, and Brad, he grew up in that area for 28 years. That was home to him. And he knew not to sleep on the streets. He was wet with rain. And then they told him he has to leave, so he went to the park. And then they told him, you have to leave, Brad, you can't stay here. And so he probably got the bus. I don't know, but he probably got a bus. He traveled with the bus all the time. And that's when he ended up in Traverse City. But I don't understand, and maybe you can help me with that, Your Honor, is they claimed that they had to have a pickup order for him. They had to go and get a pickup order. But they're officers, and if they know Brad and they can see he's not well and he's wet with clothes, isn't it to serve and to protect? You know, what happened to those?
Well, that's part of the problem of the authority of law enforcement. The statute for a long time required that they have to observe that he's involved in a situation which poses a risk of serious harm to someone immediately. And so that situation in the past has not called for that. Now, the statute's been changed, and so we're trying to educate law enforcement on the changes in the statute. In fact, it's one of the things I do. Every month, I present to law enforcement at the Detroit Wing Integrated Health Network on crisis intervention training. And I point out what their authority is now, which is broader than it used to be in terms of transporting someone to a crisis center. I think if you find someone in that situation, you really should transport them to a crisis center and let things go from there. Mm-hmm. That's the better option. Mm-hmm. And at the crisis center, they can sort out what to do.
So the act or the inaction by the police of a young man that they knew out in the open being rained on ended up with 11 people being injured, and now young Mr. Gille, 42 years old, in the forensic center. Lord knows what's going to happen next. But Judge Mack, you've been so involved now with legislation. You look now, we've got a 28-year run from the first time the Gille family had this shoved into their life in such profound way. If the legislation that's being worked on today had been in place when young Brad was 14 years old, would the path be any different? Would it be any better? And how so?
Far better. Number one, the fact that he was an adult would not preclude her from being aware of what the situation was and communicating with the people at the hospital. We put that in the statute. Number two, she could file a petition herself with the probate court and skip the hospital altogether, because she could say, look, he doesn't understand his need for treatment, he's at risk of harm, he needs help, So she could file a petition for assisted outpatient treatment on her own without the hospital being involved. Now, the statute changes we're talking about would enable persons other than psychiatrists to testify. One of the problems we have is there's not that many psychiatrists willing to testify. This would expand who can testify as to need for treatment to psychiatric nurse practitioners, physician assistants operating under the authority of a psychiatrist, as well as psychologists. And so then the person actually gets to the courthouse. But in terms of your son, when that annual order is about to expire, under the statutory change we're proposing, she'd be able to file a petition for a continuing order. And she could file it 10 days before, 40 days before, 50 days before. It doesn't matter. We take that out. So the little trick bag is gone. She doesn't need a doctor's certificate. There's an existing order in place. She can just go ahead and file that petition. So what we're doing is empowering families, frankly.
It's awesome.
And I think there's a number of other things in the bill, but those are the things that I think make the biggest difference.
What's the status of the legislation?
Well, they passed the Senate unanimously. They're now pending in the House. And I'm working with Representative Kuhn in the House to make further changes to these bills. So he's introduced, him and his team have put together the same four bills with modifications which reflect some of the changes we need to make this work.
Where can people find out more about the legislation, and where can they contact their state legislature about maybe supporting this?
Well, you can always go online to the Michigan legislature and call up the bills. The Senate bills are 219 through 222.
So 219, 220, 221, 222.
Right.
Senate bill,
Right.
Michigan legislature.
And then we have bills in the House. Now, some of them are in draft stage, so they're not really online yet, but they will be. And we have a Republican sponsor in the House, Democratic sponsor in the Senate. So the only challenge we're going to have is when they finally get these bills done, we got to figure out who's going to get credit. So that's the political part. But in terms of substance, this is very family friendly, designed to help people before they get in trouble. And we know that by, for example, guardianships in Michigan, most people think that's for the elderly. Well, if you actually check it out, over half the people who have a guardian in the state have a mental illness and was left untreated for decades, and that's why they have a guardian. If you want to reduce the number of guardianships in Michigan, treat people for mental illness when they need it.
All right.
And I'm so sorry for what your family's had to experience. I pray that we will get reform, and I hope there's no budget constraints, and I hope that it gets done quickly and that this governor will sign it into law.
There really are no budgetary problems. The evidence shows that assisted outpatient treatment reduces hospitalization by 70%, reduces length of stay, reduces homelessness, reduces drug use, reduces arrests, reduces all these things. The $5 million you wasted 1 year, wouldn't spend it. They might spend $100,000 instead to treat people. So we're talking about reprioritizing where we spend the money. So I've been very clear with the legislature. I'm not asking for any money. I'm asking you to make this system work better.
Somebody put a bug in my ear about where some of the funds would come from, and it would be from the sales of the marijuana stores and the alcohol and the taxes out of the alcohol and possibly tobacco.
Well, it's kind of ironic because the marijuana is such a contributor to mental illness.
Yeah. We will be having an upcoming episode of the Common Bridge. Gerald Posner, a renowned investigative reporter who's looking into the strength of the marijuana that's available today in retail stores, markedly more powerful than the stuff that was around 50 years ago.
That would be awesome.
On the street. So we are getting after this. Bev, any closing comment for the listeners, readers, and viewers? I know this is difficult for you to do, but thank you for sharing your story.
Welcome. I'm so grateful for what I've learned today from you, Your Honor. And I'm just, I think it could have been prevented.
Mhm.
This whole tragic
Right.
scenario could have been prevented. And I never got a call. I never got a knock on my door. I discovered it all myself. And that's what was the hard part, because they know me. They know somebody could have called me. When there were comments made about, an investigator reporter told me that people in the Sheboygan area were afraid of Brad. Why didn't somebody call me? And then I would have done like, oh, it's time. But see, Brad knew to pull away on phone calls to me. He could text me, but if he would talk to me on the phone and he'd start talking his, things that would be triggers for me to know that he's not well, then I would have done something. But one of the things that would help too is when he would get picked up, the HEPA law, they would shut me out. I would be up 2 days straight trying to figure out where he's at when he get on a bus, and find out he's in Atlanta, Georgia, and I would have detectives looking for him for me, and lose many days of sleep trying to find out where he was, because he would just travel. He's a traveling man. And now today I talked to him on the phone on the way down here, and he said he hates this country. He wants to go. He's got a passport. He went and learned how to get a passport, and he wants to move to another country. And this is what,
And part of the problem we have is the culture. As you described in the beginning of this process, people said, well, his liberty interests, self-determination and so forth. And I was doing a presentation in Texas a couple of years ago, and I met a young man who was a co-presenter named Eric Smith. And he had a long history of mental illness and substance abuse, criminal behavior, threatened to kill his parents. A judge put him in an assisted outpatient treatment plan. He's now back to baseline, and now he's a public speaker, being very successful. He says, people who think that not treating mental illness provides for liberty and choice, they're wrong. When you have an untreated mental illness, you have no liberty, you have no choice. It's with treatment that you restore liberty and you restore choice. And so that's what we're trying to do here. These are individuals who, we're not asking for hospitalization. We're asking for early intervention to help people get well.
And the default being that the order is going to continue versus the default being the order is going to end.
Right.
And we don't need more mothers like Bev to go through this situation.
We've been talking today with the Honorable Judge Milton Mack, and legislation that is moving through the Michigan legislature to reform the mental health system. We've heard firsthand from Beverly, Gille, about the journey of her son and the terrible emotional toil. And with our guest today, this is your host, Rich Helpe, signing off on the Common Bridge.
Thank you for joining us on the Common Bridge, where we continue to seek clarity across divided lines. Subscribe and support the Common Bridge on Substack, YouTube, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, we invite you to stay informed, stay engaged, and help build a bridge of common understanding.